The three cosmic rebellions and the architecture of the Promise Plan, recovering the supernatural worldview of Scripture in its Hebraic and Second Temple context by Mark Bates. Abstract. This study contends that the three compounding cosmic rebellions, Eden in Genesis chapter 3, the transgression of the Watchers in Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 through 4, and the disinheritance of the nations at Babel in Genesis chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 32 verses 8 through 9, establish the supernatural crisis that the promise plan of God systematically reverses. Adopting a text-immanent biblical theological method, the essay prioritizes the final canonical form of Scripture, discerning meaning, structure, and theology from within the text's own literary and canonical boundaries, rather than from external historical reconstruction or later systematic grids. Second Temple Jewish literature and ancient Near Eastern materials serve solely for contextual illumination. The study recovers the ancient Hebraic cognitive environment, including the divine council worldview and the functional cosmology of Genesis chapter 1 as cosmic temple inauguration, thereby demonstrating the organic unity and progressive development of the canon. While classical Protestant forensic models of soteriology possess genuine textual support and pastoral utility, when developed independently of the canonical narrative, they risk reducing the Messiah's mission to a transactional remedy for original sin. In contrast, the Promise Plan integrates forensic, narrative, and cosmic dimensions, tracing a single unfolding divine purpose from the Abrahamic call immediately following Babel through Israel to its climactic fulfillment in the Messiah. Gentiles are grafted into the nourishing root of Israel, as described in Romans chapter 11 verse 17 and Ephesians chapter 2 verses 11 through 22, without annulling the concrete, future-oriented promises to ethnic Israel in Romans chapter 11 verses 25 through 29. By situating Jesus' ministry and the apostolic witness within this framework, the essay demonstrates that the biblical authors present redemption as the historical and eschatological restoration of sacred space, covenant relationship, and unmediated divine presence within a unified people of God. Introduction. Western Christian systematic theology has frequently operated within an epistemological framework shaped by post-biblical philosophical systems, Greek analytical reasoning, and Enlightenment rationalism. While these influences have contributed significant doctrinal clarity and pastoral resources, they have occasionally risked reducing the ancient supernatural architecture of the biblical text to a more mechanical narrative. A primary example is the near-exclusive focus on the fall of Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 3 as the sole origin of human depravity and cosmic brokenness. Although this emphasis rightly underscores the forensic dimensions of sin and atonement, it can obscure the broader canonical portrayal of evil as the cumulative result of three distinct yet interrelated cosmic rebellions. Both covenantal and dispensational theologians have engaged these rebellions, whether by stressing covenant continuity or by preserving distinctions between Israel and the Church, yet each framework has sometimes imposed external structures that the text itself does not require. Returning to the Hebraic cognitive environment of the biblical authors and the Second Temple interpretive horizons that shape the New Testament, writers reveals a more complex supernatural narrative. These three fractures, Eden, the Watchers, and Babel, necessitate the promise plan of God, the single, unified, and progressively unfolding divine purpose to reclaim the disinherited nations, disarm rebellious powers, and re-establish unmediated divine presence while preserving the concrete significance of the promises originally given to ethnic Israel within the one people of God. This essay traces that promise plan through the canonical storyline, demonstrating its capacity to integrate forensic insights with narrative and participatory dimensions in a manner that honors the text's own organic logic. 1. The before picture, functional creation and royal priestly vocation. To grasp the gravity of the rebellions, one must first recover the teleological architecture of the cosmos as presented in Genesis chapter 1. In the ancient Near Eastern cognitive environment, Genesis chapter 1 is not primarily an account of material origins but of functional origins. God orders the formless and empty, tohu wa bohu, in Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, by establishing functions, time on days 1 through 4, weather and food on days 2 through 3, and living creatures on days 5 through 6, and installing functionaries to govern them. The climax arrives on the seventh day when God rests, Shabbat in Genesis chapter 2 verses 2 through 3, an ancient Near Eastern motif signifying active residence and sovereign rule within a newly inaugurated cosmic temple rather than mere cessation of labor. This cosmic temple inauguration establishes a trajectory that finds explicit continuation in the tabernacle and temple pattern of Exodus chapters 25 through 40 and the new creation temple of Revelation chapter 21 verse 22. Within this sacred space, humanity is created in the image of God, Selim Elohim in Genesis chapter 1 verses 26 through 27. Far from a checklist of cognitive capacities emphasized in later Hellenistic anthropologies, the Imago Dei constitutes an endowed ontological identity and a royal priestly vocation. Male and female together are installed as Yahweh's physical co-regents, commissioned to mediate his presence, maintain ordered sacred space, and extend his rule in Genesis chapter 1 verse 28. This functional cosmology and divine counsel backdrop in Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, let us make humankind in our image, set the stage for the subsequent fractures that the promise plan will progressively heal. 2. The first rebellion, Eden, the Nachash, and the loss of sacred space. The first cosmic rebellion occurs in Genesis chapter 3 and involves both human and divine actors. The antagonist is the Nachash, a serpentine divine rebel and member of the heavenly host in Genesis chapter 3 verse 1. Later prophetic texts repurpose this primeval event, drawing on imagery of a guardian cherub or shining divine being who, in arrogance, sought to usurp the Most High on the cosmic mountain in Isaiah chapter 14 verses 12 through 15 and Ezekiel chapter 28 verses 12 through 19. The dual rebellion, human disobedience and supernatural seduction, results in expulsion from Eden, severing unmediated access to God's presence. Within the Hebraic framework, the primary consequences are mortality and estrangement, in Genesis chapter 3 verses 19 and 22 through 24, fracturing the cosmic temple and necessitating redemptive restoration. Yet the promise plan is already foreshadowed in the proto-evangelium of Genesis chapter 3 verse 15, he will crush your head and you will strike his heel, a trajectory that anticipates the suffering servant of Isaiah and the last Adam of Pauline soteriology. 3. The second rebellion, the Watchers, the Epkalu polemic, and the proliferation of depravity. While Genesis chapter 3 introduced sin and death, the second rebellion explains the explosive proliferation of wickedness that necessitated the flood. Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 through 4 describes the sons of God, Bene Ha-Elohim, descending to earth and taking human wives, producing the Nephilim. This narrative functions as a deliberate theological polemic against the Mesopotamian Apkallu tradition, in which semi-divine sages brought civilization. The biblical authors subvert this motif. The divine beings commit cosmic treason, imparting illicit knowledge that accelerates idolatry, violence, and demonic proliferation. Second Temple literature, especially 1 Enoch chapters 6 through 16, identifies these offenders as the Watchers, who taught humanity warfare, sorcery, and forbidden arts. It is important to note that such literature is used here as contextual illumination, not as an independent source of doctrine. The canonical text remains the sole theological authority. The New Testament apostles operate fully within this framework. 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4 and Jude verse 6 reference the angels cast into chains of gloomy darkness, Tartarus, awaiting judgment. This rebellion compounds the fracture of sacred space, deepening humanity's alignment with rebellious powers and underscoring the cosmic scope of the Promise Plan's restorative mission. 4. The third rebellion, Babel, the disinheritance of the nations, and cosmic geography. Post-flood humanity's trajectory culminates at Babel in Genesis chapter 11 verses 1 through 9, where an attempt to construct an artificial sacred space and centralized power provokes divine judgment. Yahweh judicially disinherits the nations, dividing them according to the number of the sons of God in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 8 through 9, as preserved in the Dead Sea Scrolls and Septuagint. These lesser Elohim subsequently rebel, demanding illicit worship and plunging their allotted territories into spiritual darkness in Psalm chapter 82. The result is cosmic geography. The world outside Israel becomes hostile territory under the administration of fallen territorial powers. Immediately following this disinheritance, God initiates the promise plan by calling Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, setting apart Israel as his own inheritance in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 9, to serve as the conduit through which all families of the earth will be blessed. 5. Jesus' earthly ministry and the assault on cosmic geography. The Messiah does not merely enact a forensic transaction. He enters the Deuteronomy chapter 32 worldview on the fallen Elohim's own turf. At Caesarea Philippi, located at the foot of Mount Hermon, the traditional descent site of the Watchers, Jesus declares that the gates of Hades will not prevail against his church in Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, immediately preceding the transfiguration on the same mountain. In Luke chapter 10, verses 1 through 20, he sends out 70 or 72 disciples, a number corresponding to the Genesis chapter 10 table of nations, commissioning them to proclaim the kingdom and cast out demons. Their success prompts Jesus' declaration, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven," in Luke chapter 10, verse 18. These strategic actions constitute targeted strikes against the rebellious divine council, reclaiming territory and advancing the promise plan's reversal of the three rebellions. 6. The promise plan and the systematic reversal of the rebellions. These tactical engagements with cosmic geography prepare the way for the promise plan's climactic reversal of all three rebellions in the Messiah's death, resurrection, and the outpouring of the Spirit. The promise plan, initiated with Abraham and carried forward through Israel as a kingdom of priests in Exodus chapter 19, verse 6, finds its decisive fulfillment in the Messiah. Each rebellion is reversed in turn. The cross and resurrection address Eden's mortality and estrangement by defeating death and providing the ultimate substitute in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 20 through 28. Pauline language of principalities and powers. In Colossians chapter 2, verse 15, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 21, and Ephesians chapter 3, verse 10 draws directly from the divine council worldview. At the cross, Christ disarms these authorities and strips their legal claim. Pentecost completes the reversal of Babel. Luke deliberately echoes the Septuagint of Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8, when the Most High divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God, and Genesis chapter 11, verses 7 and 9 with the verbs diamorizo, divided or distributed in Acts chapter 2, verse 3, and synchio, bewildered or confused, in Acts chapter 2, verse 6, signaling that the reclamation of the nations has begun. Gentiles are grafted into Israel's root in Romans chapter 11, verses 17 through 24, expanding rather than replacing the concrete promises to ethnic Israel in Romans chapter 11, verses 25 through 29. Thus, the promise plan maintains both continuity and genuine development without imposing later systematic discontinuities or spiritualizations. Conclusion. To read the biblical text responsibly is to read it within its native Hebraic and Second Temple horizons. By recovering the supernatural worldview of the three cosmic rebellions and tracing their reversal through the promise plan, Scripture emerges as a sophisticated, unified masterwork. It narrates the Creator's relentless campaign to reclaim his disinherited cosmos, disarm rebellious principalities, and ultimately fuse heaven and earth in the New Jerusalem, the restored cosmic temple where God dwells eternally with a glorified family, in Revelation chapter 21, verse 22. This canonical vision integrates the forensic insights of classical Protestant soteriology with the narrative and cosmic dimensions native to the text, offering greater coherence than either rigid dispensational fragmentation or covenantal spiritualization. While classical dispensationalism rightly preserves the concrete future of ethnic Israel and covenant theology rightly stresses the continuity of God's people, The Promise Plan offers a textually derived via media that honors both dimensions without the artificial discontinuities or spiritualizations each system can introduce. Theological anthropology, therefore, extends beyond academic inquiry. It constitutes an invitation for the Church to inhabit the true royal priestly vocation of the Imago Dei until the Messiah returns to consummate the one people of God. Recovering this cosmic narrative has practical implications for ministry. By grounding preaching, discipleship, and spiritual formation in the broader biblical storyline, leaders can cultivate communities that understand salvation not only as forensic pardon but as participation in God's redemptive movement to restore sacred space, confront spiritual powers, and embody the kingdom among the nations.